Good afternoon. This is Avraham Shira from Eretz Israel. It's Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbat, and you see behind me the mountain view is slowly filling with mist and moisture, and it's supposed to rain pretty soon. And I was thinking about the rain. The idea of rain on Shabbat, is called charity. It's, excuse me. The sun on Shabbat is called charity to the poor, but there's the thing called Gishmei Bracha, the rain of blessing, when it comes on Friday night. Because on Friday night, nobody has to work. And on Friday night, the earth is not being bothered by the human race, at least not around here, hopefully. And so the idea is, though, of rain as blessing, and we see that rain can also be the opposite of blessing if there's too much rain. And so this is kind of a paradox and one symbol of the paradox that we live in this world, that God and man as partners is also a paradox. And we live in this world where, behind me a few moments ago, I heard what sounded like gunshots, and they could have been fired for a wedding, or they could have been fired by soldiers practicing shooting, or it could have been gunshots by terrorists, Hamas people warming up their motor, We don't know. And we live here in this beautiful place, on this view, and we hear things and we don't know. And you know what? Living here teaches you to be okay with not knowing. And I think this is the idea that can elevate us to a new level, to a level of understanding this paradox that we live in, the paradox of being physical beings in a spiritual world and spiritual beings in a physical world. They're both paradoxes. We have physical needs, we have spiritual needs, and they don't seem to get along too well. They seem almost impossible to balance. We have holy desires and unholy desires. We face death daily. We're ephemeral creatures that, if we're lucky, our bodies will end up in a Jewish cemetery, and maybe our souls will enter a higher realm of perfection and grace and beauty and joy. And maybe not. And the whole idea of living as a finite being in a world where we're told and taught that there's an infinite being, running the show, is like, well, why does he get to be infinite? Why does God get to be infinite and we have to be finite? We have to be limited. He can do anything he wants, anytime, anywhere, anyway. Is that fair? Well, Pirkei Avot tells us, against our will we were created, against our will we'll die, against our will we go to work. There's a lot of contradictions in being a human being. And they cause this psychic friction between the different parts of our souls. The lower part of the soul wants the base needs of this world. The higher part wants very little to do with this world. We're taught that the higher part of our soul, the neshama, the spiritual part of us, wants only to keep Torah and mitzvot, and has pleasure from things like the scent of flowers and beautiful creations that have nice smells. But otherwise, the soul doesn't really get much out of food and drink and wine and whiskey. So, again, we have to deal with contradictions. And how can we embrace this? How can we get over this? This has been a problem that I've kind of wrestled with for a long time. And it kind of was one of the reasons I think that I became religious 30 years ago. Because I wanted to solve these contradictions. And I found it too unpleasant to live in this world of knowing I want this thing, but this thing is socially unacceptable, or knowing that other people will do things that I find socially unacceptable, but I have to still accept it. Where is the peace between all this? And I think that's why we say, "O say shalom b'mormav, hu say shalom aleinu." We all call Amo Yisrael. The one who makes peace in heaven, he'll make peace down here. That we really don't have the handle to grasp all of this greatness, this idea of eternity and infinity and finiteness and the ephemeral, the short-lived. Our brains have a hard time holding the basic needs of getting through the day, and maybe a little Gemara, a little Zohar on the side, maybe you're a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor, and you have to deal with a little more on your shoulders. But when we talk about the big picture, where's the peace? Well, of course, the peace is Shabbat. The peace is letting go. The peace is acceptance. Accepting the contradictions, accepting the paradoxes that we live in. So why do I have to accept it, you might ask? Why do I have to accept that I'm going to die one day? Some people have died recently. We drove up to the graveyard, and you get instantly humbled just by getting close to a graveyard. Because you realize all our urges and our desires and our dreams and our longing and our hopes, and as beautiful and as exalted as they may be, one day we're not going to be here. And all the beautiful things that we built and the beautiful people that we perhaps brought into the world, or hopefully we had a little help with that, and they're going to put us in the ground, and maybe our soul will go up, hopefully, and what's left of all that longing, that desire? Well, we're told that our longing and desire for Hashem never dies. That it's like a bank account of desire. That every time you want to be attached to the Creator and be part of His will, you're transforming your lower will into an upper will, and that upper will is put into an account. And it's a nice thought. It's a nice metaphor. I have an account in heaven, and all it has to be filled with is another desire for God of some kind or another. It could be a mitzvah, a good deed, a good thought. So, we come to the place also of this friction that we find ourselves now in our generation between the vaxxers and the non-vaxxers and the believers and the conspiratists. And there's so many endless choices over here. The news, is it fake? Is it real? Is it partial? All of those contradictions start crowding in our brain, and what it does is takes away the ability to enjoy life, to enjoy what is, to enjoy the moments. Now, a lot of people have suffered a lot of things. I'm not discounting or diminishing anything that anybody has suffered over the last 2 years of this terrible plague, whatever you want to call it. People are dying. People are suffering. And so there we have it again. Are we supposed to take a side and stand on the sidewalk and protest? Or am I supposed to stay locked up in my room and with my head, under the pillow? What do we do? Now, some people choose this, and some people choose the other, and some people don't know what to choose. Perhaps most of the people don't know what to choose. And, I have friends that are activists and friends that are pacifists. And I have friends that believe that God is doing everything for the good and you don't have to do anything but praise Him. Then I have other friends that say, why do you always play the God card? Where's human endeavor, human experience, human, ambition, desire, action? Where is the human side of the equation between God and man? How much is it really God and how much is it really man? And this is the most classic theological question. You'll hear it in every university and every church and every synagogue, is the conflict between free choice, man has choice, and God being the one who sets the agenda and knows what's going to happen before it happens. And that we're not here to try to solve that, because we're told that if you try to solve that, is it God or is it man, that you will end up in an endless spiral, like a black hole, that you can't come out of because there's no solution to it ultimately. That's what Rabbi Nachman teaches in Likutei Moharan. And I tend to follow what he says more than what I think, because I think he had a little more time down the road in the world of godliness and the truth of our Creator. However, go back to the idea of embracing the contradiction. How do I embrace the contradictions? How do I embrace the fact that I love my grandkids and one day I'm not going to be here to love them? And that's hard for me to accept, because I used to think I'm going to live forever until the Kabbalah said it's true. If you're a good person, your soul will live forever. Your divine soul will live forever. I said, well, that's a pretty good deal. Because as a kid, I used to think I was going to live forever. And I didn't even know why. And people thought I was crazy. And then I started to think I was crazy, of course, because enough people tell you you're crazy, you know what you end up believing. Until I get, the Zohar says, no, we have this soul that does not die. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, the true soul does not die. And so if I have that promise, I'm going to keep that promise right in my front pocket. But still, there's still that contradiction of leaving behind everything we build and everything we love and every person and every experience. And how do we solve this? Well, Shabbat is one solution. Shabbat gives us the choice to choose the peace between the contradiction. I don't choose one side, I don't choose the other side. I choose the union of the sides. That man and God are one. That physical and spiritual are one. And that the holy, which does not like to reside with the unholy, but the two are working together even though we don't see it. That evil people with evil intention end up causing goodness, like the biblical prophet Bilam, who ended up blessing Israel even though he wanted to curse them. And that's a symbol for us that even the most evil people can actually cause very good things to happen even though they don't intend it at all. But the peace in the contradiction is understanding that they're really two halves of a whole. And to embrace that. If you're lonely, then how can I embrace my loneliness except for understanding that loneliness means I'm alone and I really want human beings. I want human contact. But am I really going out there and giving human contact? Am I embracing people? Am I shaking hands and hugging people I haven't seen for a while? Am I smiling at strangers in the street to acknowledge their presence as a human being? Am I putting myself out there? Well, I notice that every time I go to the synagogue, I'm not lonely. If I stay in my room long enough, I'll get lonely. So it has to do with, reaching out. There's an amazing Raya Mehemna. Raya Mehemna is one of the hidden books of the Zohar. It means the faithful shepherd. Of course, it's the part of the Zohar we attribute to Moses. And he says over there that in the times of the Messiah, listen closely and tell your friends. Because Shabbat is the ultimate wedding. And the Raya Mehemna says that in the end of days, it will be very, very hard for people to find their other half. It will be very hard to find your beloved, your man or your woman. And then the Zohar goes on to teach us there's going to be a time where all of a sudden everybody's going to have their other half. Now, how rapid that transformation is, I can't say. It sounds like a pretty big deal for the hundreds of millions of single people that are out there that want to be with somebody. Maybe billions, I don't know. It's a statistic you probably could spend a lifetime tracking down. But of those a billion people that want to be with and in love and in marriage and in sanctity and building a family that can't or aren't or haven't found the right person, there's a real deep pain there. There's a real suffering. But the Zohar says, no, it's going to happen where we're all going to find that other person. Now, Baruch Hashem, I'm married 28 years, so I'm happy. I'm good with that, But as a therapist, I deal with a lot of suffering and people, people are missing something when they don't have that person waiting there at home for you. So Shabbat comes along and says, come home to Shabbat. Come home to this time with God. Because our ultimate union is not with another human being. Our ultimate union is with the Creator himself. And he is not he, it is not she, it is above gender. So there is this place in us that is above gender, and this place wants to attach to that place that's above gender. Because it's not about sex, and it's not about, all the different levels of desire and passion, except for the final level where it's not about me. And it's about the infinite trying to reveal himself in the physical realm through human beings. And that union, when it takes place, special things happen. A lot of special things happen. Now, again, it's not to diminish people's pain, but we have to see the bigger picture to get out of our pain. We have to solve the contradictions. And the choice, the place of true human choice, it's not whether I want tomatoes or cucumbers, or I want to live in Israel, I want to live in Brooklyn. The real free choice is to choose that the contradiction is one, that the physical and the spiritual are one, that the human and the non-human are one, that the holy and the unholy are struggling to find the place of oneness, to find the place of transformation. And when I choose that, I might not be there. I'm sure I'm probably not quite there. But when I choose it, I get on the right path. I get on the right track here. So the Zohar is trying to teach us, that there is going to be a time where every person has that other beloved that they've been waiting for. And maybe I'm not ready for it now. And maybe I feel like I missed the boat. I know people that feel that way. But the boat's coming back. The boat is coming back, folks. And we don't know when it's going to be, and we don't know how long it's going to take. In the Zohar, there are descriptions of the Messianic era as lasting hundreds of years. And then there are opinions it's going to happen in one day. So maybe it's also both. That there are things that take many, many, many decades and centuries to unfold and work themselves out. And then there are days where things just change forever and for the good. So we have to embrace the contradiction through our power of faith in the union of the contradiction. That's how we solve it. That's how we heal it. And that's how we are divine beings. Because the lions and the tigers and the bears are not worried about this contradiction. They're not thinking about Olam Haba. They're not thinking about the infinity and the eternity of their soul. But we were given such a thing and forced, if we are feeling sentient beings, to contemplate those ideas. Now, human beings that choose not to contemplate these ideas, that's their free choice. To not think about God, to not think about their death, to not think about where I'm going to go when I leave this mortal coil, as Shakespeare told us. If a person chooses that, that's also their free choice. But we know, anybody who's a believer really knows that deep inside their not choosing is just an act of denial, an act of, I can't deal with this idea. It's too painful. It's too difficult. I'm not going there. And that's also a part of our human nature. Sometimes we use denial to protect ourselves from things we can't face. And that's also acceptable to a degree. But it's not a 20-year denial. It's not a degree. You don't get a PhD in denial. You get a PhD when you solve the equation, you solve the contradiction, and you can embrace the opposites, and you can embrace the good and evil in another person. And that's where love begins. When we can embrace each other with our good and our less than good, and we accept it all as one unified living being. And we should all have that blessing this Shabbat of seeing the oneness behind the contradictions, seeing the oneness in the struggle between the material and the physical and the spiritual, and find it in ourselves too. That even our struggles have a place of peace, and it should be this Shabbat, and it should be every Shabbat, until the great Shabbat. And the great Shabbat, well, there's a lot of promises there we're waiting to collect on, so stay tuned. God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat. We'll look for you next week on all the platforms. And we're continuing our series with Rabbi Nachman on Patreon. And well, we're chugging forward slowly like one of these old locomotives, on the track of Likutei Moharan, but every single paragraph is new wisdom for us. And every time we come back to it, it's still new. So be there, and we'll look for you elsewhere on other platforms this week. We start up again at Web Yeshiva on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Israel time. And hopefully we'll be back on the Lighthouse soon. They're retooling their website. And there's a few other outlets I'm sure that I could sneak up on somehow or another. So God bless you all, and have a great Shabbat.